Hi there, students. To assume and to presume. Well, both of these words mean to suppose. They also have other meanings, and I'll look at those in a minute. But there is a slight difference between to assume and to presume. If you presume something is true, your supposition, your belief is based on evidence or based on probability. Okay? So you've got some evidence that it is true. It's 4 o'clock, so I presume we're going to have a cup of tea. Yeah? 4 o'clock evidence, 4 o'clock tea time, presume. To assume is to suppose, but without evidence. To suppose because you believe it, because you are certain it is true. You don't stop to think and have a chain of logic because of this, because of this. You just assume it's true. Somebody came up behind and kissed me. I assumed it was my wife. That was the logical person. I presumed it was my wife because I could smell her perfume. And that gives you an idea of the difference. So, to presume, to base your assumption, to base your supposition on evidence or on the lack of evidence against something. Whereas if you assume something, you take it for granted. You don't use logic, you just know it's true, and then you might be wrong. Yeah, okay? So if you assume something, you're just certain it was like this, and then you could be surprised. When the door banged, I assumed it was my wife coming home from work. When the door banged, I looked at the clock, and it was 6 p.m, so I presumed it was my wife coming back from work. She always comes back at 6 o'clock. Okay, so that's the difference. Now, let's look at the other meanings of assume and presume. To assume, to take a duty, a position, an office, an obligation. I assumed my boss's role while he was sick, so I took on his role. Please assume a kneeling position for the next yoga movement. The spirit assumed human form. So to take on something different. Yeah, to take responsibility for. Yeah. We can also use to assume, meaning to pretend to have qualities, to adopt qualities. So when he became rich, he assumed airs and graces that he didn't have. Yeah? So to take on a quality, very often falsely. You can also use to assume, meaning to take over without justification. To usurp, if you like. So he assumed command. The dictator assumed control of the country. That would definitely be usurp. You could also assume a debt or an obligation. So I signed a document to say that if he didn't pay the mortgage, I would assume the debt. Okay, so to assume a debt. Now, let's look at to presume. To presume is to do something without the proper authority. To be presumptuous. If you are presumptuous, you go beyond what is right and proper. Yeah? What is appropriate through arrogance or too much self-confidence. Yeah? I wouldn't presume to tell him how to do his job. So it's to dare to do something that's not appropriate, maybe to be cheeky, yeah? To assume that you are so important that you can do things that other people don't have to obey the rules. He presumed to know more English than I did. I've had that situation where I've done translations for people, and the non-native speaker presumes to know more about my translation than me. Well, very often students do teach me things, but if the person's presumptuous, assuming directly they know more than everyone, it's a bit off-putting. Okay, we can also use to presume, meaning to presuppose, to imply. So if you are studying for the proficiency exam, this presumes that you already have a high level of English. If you're going to live in this area, it presumes that you have a lot of money and are able to pay these bills. So to presuppose, it's something that's necessary, a necessary condition before you go. Visiting China presumes having a visa, because if you arrive and you don't have a visa, they won't let you in. Okay, what about formality? I would say assume is probably neutral, 5 out of 10. To presume, maybe 5.5, 6. With this meaning of being presumptuous, he presumed to tell me how to do my job. I think that's a little bit more formal, maybe 6.5 or even 7. Although generally for this supposed meaning, you can use them informally in the pub, and you could use it in a formal writing. So that's good. Notice as well, they're both regular verbs. He assumed, he has assumed. She presumed, she has presumed. Okay, and both of these words come from Latin. Okay, in Latin there's a verb sumere, which means to put on, to take up, to take for yourself. Yeah, and then assume, add, so you take it up, add to, directly. Presume, pry, sumere, before. So you have evidence before you reach your conclusion, whereas ad sumere, you go directly to taking up the conclusion. So, to assume, to believe it's true without even thinking about it. To presume, to look at the evidence and then come to your conclusion. So, if you enjoyed the video, give it a rating. Like that, I will be able to presume you enjoyed it, because it would be presumptuous of me to assume you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Assume and presume.